So there's this concept by famous Swiss guy Carl Jung about a shadow, right? I should actually preface this whole little tangent to begin this episode with I've never read the work of Carl Jung. I try not to do that, to like cite something that I'm not directly familiar with. I try to read primary sources. This is a regurgitation of like a video essay kind of thing I saw on it, right? But he has this concept called a shadow, right? A Jungian shadow, it's called. And it's basically this idea that everything that you hate, everything that makes you annoyed in the world around you, in the outside world, your pet peeves are reflections of your darker self, the part of yourself that you really don't like. So for an example, I have this huge pet peeve. I don't like when people talk about themselves too much, right? A Jungian shadow would say that I don't hate when people talk about themselves too much. I hate the reflection of my deeply self-obsessed inner self that I see in that. I'm actually just a super vain, self-obsessed person, and that's why I hate it, because it reminds me of that fact. I'm going to continue this tangent before we think about how accurate that might be. But anyways, I think this concept's interesting because I think it says a lot. Maybe I don't believe it in the most direct sense. You know, Jung is not known for his accuracy, especially these days. But I do think that it's an interesting way of looking at the world, because there's like kind of a truth in there that we see a lot of ourselves in the world around us. You know, I'm as guilty of this as anyone, that we kind of lock in a worldview, and once we lock in that worldview, maybe we don't see the rest of them quite as much. You know what I mean? We kind of start analyzing things through a lens of our own experiences, and you know, maybe it's your own philosophy that you've read or just your own thing you came up with, and then you kind of just self-affirm 24/7 until the world around you just becomes a reflection of yourself. I think there's a lot of truth in that. I think that that's a very interesting concept, and I think that, like, in thinking about it these last couple of days, it almost neatly tied a bow on a lot of the discussions we've had here on Paint&Talk about truth. You know, a little while ago I did this thing about perception, then I did this other Paint&Talk about is truth even possible, looking at like kind of judging things based on science and primary sources versus your own lived experiences. You know, I've done a little bit about this now, and I think that the Jungian shadow kind of made me think about something that I hadn't considered. And that's that even if truth was possible, at one point, it is almost certainly not at this point. And I want to tie this to the idea of algorithms, right? Because the Jungian shadow is actually extremely similar to the way an algorithm functions, right? You seeing yourself in the world around you is very similar to the fact that in social media, you are only curated things that reflect your own interests. Of course, it gets it wrong sometimes, but it's a mostly general fact that that's how that works, right? I mean, we can all relate to getting something that's like, oh my god, I was just thinking about that. You know, like, our algorithms know us better than any person ever could. And have you guys ever had like a friend kind of come to you and be like, oh, I got this thing about like feet on my algorithm, and you're like, okay, so like my friend definitely likes feet, and now I know that, and that's really weird. That's a crazy example I just used. I don't know what propelled me to do that, but that's what happens a lot of the time. That's the way that this works. Your own interest will be reflected back onto you. And this has led to a lot of confirmation bias. I feel like echo chamber is like the biggest word of all time now. Echo chamber is like, I hear it is being way overused. It's really annoying me, actually. That's a whole other side tangent. But like, I feel like anytime somebody has a wrong take on social media, everyone needs to jump down their throat and be like, you're in an echo chamber. Like, people learned this word and just don't know how to let it go. But it's addressing a very real thing that we're all feeling, that like, we kind of, even that's kind of going back to the Jungian shadow, even the fact that so many people feel the need to point a finger if you're in an echo chamber whenever they disagree with somebody, sort of is almost a reflection of the fact that we all realize in one way or another, we're kind of all stuck in an echo chamber right now, and we hate it, or at least I know I hate it. Like, I hate the fact that I'm scrolling through social media, and, let's say a big event happens in the world, right? A politician does something. It could be anything. Just label, imprint whatever you want onto this. And I go, I don't like that thing, right? And I'm scrolling my social media feed, and I'm getting a lot of other things about how people don't like that thing. Now, my first instinct in hearing that is like, oh, this is great. I am a right person. I see the world the way everybody else does. This is confirmation that I am sane, and that, everybody agrees that this is a bad thing. And, I could walk out on the streets, I could go into the 7-Eleven, and I could just start ranting to the cashier, and they would agree, because everybody sees it this way. But there's also the half of me that has to stop myself then and go, you're being fed exactly what you want, because that's how these platforms work. Of course you're being fed what you want. There's obviously exceptions for some of this, but it really does go to show that the main way that you could know if you're actually in the minority or the majority is going out into the world or looking at polls, I guess. But come on, what do I look like? What you think I'm looking at a poll? No, never. So if our algorithms are reflections of what we want to see, and we're already, I don't believe in the idea that everything you see that you dislike is representing your inner darkness. I think that's a little bit I think Carl Jung might have been watching a little bit of I don't know what TV program, but I think there's some TV program that got in his head. Was he even alive when TV was alive? I don't think so, but if he was, he'd be watching Star Trek or something, and he watched the episode where they went to the mirror dimension and was like, yep, this is facts. This is all to say, I think it's a little bit out there. I don't think that concept's 100% accurate, but I do think it's accurate that we see ourselves in the world around us, right? And now we're seeing ourselves in our social media algorithms, and we're getting fed things we want to see. And because of the way that social media functions inherently, going back almost to what we were talking about 2 days ago with virality, where that doesn't really exist anymore, since we're all being fed a unique experience of culture and of the world around us, and we're only seeing certain events that happen. If you're not reading the news especially, you're really only seeing certain events that happen. This idea that you could ever know the truth, not only of the interpretation of facts, but of the facts in general, is absurd. I think it's I almost feel like with everything in mind here, looking at all these things together, I'm almost so confident to go no, truth doesn't exist anymore. Because there's no way it can. How do you get an accurate interpretation of everything when already I think going back to that conversation we were having a little while ago that I keep referencing of can truth exist, right? I think that was interesting, and I think there's some preset tough things about truth of the way you perceive the world, of scientific data versus kind of your own feelings towards things. I think that's a really interesting basis to start a conversation on. Shout out to Francis Bacon and, oh my god, I'm blanking on the other guy's name now. Shout out to, Berkeley. Is it Berkeley? Don't know. Shout out to those two guys for doing that though. Awesome stuff, right? But I think on top of that, looking at not only, because that was easy back then, right? Because it's you're getting to a core sort of two things fighting against each other, but you're in a pretty simple world. Or maybe it just feels like it because our world's so much more complicated now. But I don't know, I feel I am confident in going when you're in 1700s England, dude, it must be so simple, right? You got the king, you got the crazy guy on the street, you got the guy handing out the paper, and you kind of just got to interpret stuff. I think there is almost an automatic consensus reality that you're being pitched. Layering on top of that already really tough battle that those two had, right? Of science and data versus your own, I think it's more eloquently referred to as the British empiricists versus the continental rationalists, right? Looking at that battle and then layering on top of it this whole other okay, now the way you consume media is going to be everywhere. It's going to be the most postmodern mess of information you could ever perceive, right? The way you consume media is going to be wrong. Misinformation is going to be accessible to everyone. Everyone will be a journalist now in one way or another. People will be worse than ever at vetting facts they get, myself included. I'm terrible at it. I spread misinformation to my friends. Sometimes I do it on purpose, I'll admit. Sometimes I see a news article from something I know is fake, but I send it to the group chat just because I just want to see. Like, I'm just like, this is hilarious if this was true. And then, you know what? I'll say it. Sometimes when they really like what that article has to say, I'll just let it ride. I will. I do that. I've done that at least once this week, and I think it's funny. But it's not helping this issue we have of the fact that truth is really just an impossibility. Like 100% truth is just an impossibility to do right now. And I don't see any other way. And then I do think this is going right back to the conversation we were having yesterday about how thoughts are sort of these amorphous things we have to pitch linearly. I think that provides another layer on top of it, because I think that, okay, I'm really going to mess up the execution on this because it's kind of a thought that I'm having right now, and I didn't think about it at all when I was going on my walk earlier, so let's hope this comes out okay. I think that already there was sort of an unaddressed problem within just like the way that we do things, of the fact that our thoughts are not going to be linear, and we have to pitch them linearly. We think in 3D, but we can only write things down in 2D. Does that make sense? Right? I think that's another inherent problem of just like thinking and like, you know, idea spreading, academia, knowledge, whatever buzzword you want to use for people thinking about things and doing stuff, right? I think it already presents a problem in that field. On top of that, though, that being kind of an unaddressed thing, right? We've evolved to this point where I think we've created so much and we've expanded and progressed. We've progressed into this world around us where I do think our media is capable of pitching us a three-dimensional idea now. Like, as much as our thoughts are linear, the way we consume content and the way that we consume the whole world happening, like, at the speed of light, basically, beamed into our heads, and half of it's based on emotion, half of it's based on fact, and one thing for every 100 is true. I think that that's a direct reflection of the fact that we do think in these amorphous, abstract ways that we are able to see within the internet being something more complicated than we can already comprehend. But I don't think we ever figured out how to process things that way. And I think that creates a disconnect. Sort of, this is another thing we've talked about on Paint&Talk, sort of in the way that, you know, it's impossible for us to comprehend, like, the largest number ever. You know what I mean? Like, sort of in the way where when I look back at my journal and go, I've journaled 800 times, that's impossible for me to understand because I can't, in my head, quantify and imagine 800 days. I can only go day by day. I think that's sort of what's happening with the internet and the way we're consuming media, of we can think in this way that we don't fully understand because we're not able to put it down onto paper in that way. We're not able to actually pitch it in that way, but we're receiving media in this super complicated way. I would love if somebody was smarter than me watching this and could tell me what I'm thinking, because I don't know. Hopefully, I think I just sounded insane. I think this is the episode that I get institutionalized, because that, I don't know. I think I did, I don't know, guys. I don't know. But that's why I think truth is impossible. That's my conclusion on that. This is the painting. I wanted to try today to go in doing the eyes first and then everything else second. I need some time to think on this one. It should be up either today or tomorrow, a short discussing the paintings for the week and what I think, what I wanted to do with them, how they ended up. So go check that out to see my thoughts on this on this painting over here. Yeah, I don't know. The eyes I like a little bit more, but I feel like this is just like a little scary. I don't know. Go follow me over on Instagram to keep up over there, see my thoughts on this as I come up with them. And until next time, guys, gals, and pals, my name is Max Zeiss. This has been Paint Talk episode 138. I'm here every morning, painting and talking with you all.